The massive space station called Nexus Prime floated in the darkness between stars like a metal city built for giants. Captain Lee Dong-ho pressed his face against the small window of the Earth ship called New Seoul and watched the alien vessels, docked around the station. Each ship looked different and strange. Some were long and thin like metal snakes. Others were round like eggs covered in spikes. A few looked like they were made of crystal that glowed with soft light. "Are you ready for this?" asked Ambassador Yoon Ji-won as she walked up behind him. She wore the dark blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic service with small gold stars on her collar. Her black hair was pulled back neat and tight. Her face showed no fear, but Dong-ho could see worry in her dark eyes. "As ready as anyone can be when they are about to ask 12 alien races to let humans join their club," Dong-ho replied. He turned away from the window and checked his own uniform one more time. Everything had to be perfect today. Earth had waited 50 years for this chance to join the Galactic Council. 50 years since they first made contact with alien life. 50 years of careful diplomacy and patient waiting. The docking tube connected to their ship with a soft bump and a hiss of air. Commander Park Min-ho stood at attention near the airlock. His uniform was different from the diplomats. It was gray instead of blue and had fewer decorations. He was supposed to be the head of Earth's defense fleet, but everyone knew that Earth barely had a defense fleet at all. Just a few small ships that carried supplies between Earth and the moon colonies. "Remember what we practiced," Ji-won said quietly as the airlock doors opened. "We are here to show them that humans are peaceful. We want to trade and learn and help make the galaxy a better place. We are not a threat to anyone." The three humans walked through the docking tube and into the alien station. The air smelled different here. It was clean but had a metallic taste that made Dong-ho think of old coins. The walls were made of some gray metal that seemed to glow with its own light. Strange symbols were carved into the walls in patterns that hurt his eyes to look at too long. An alien waited for them at the end of the tube. It stood on 4 legs like a horse but had arms like a human. Its head was long and pointed with large yellow eyes. When it spoke, its voice sounded like it was talking through water. "Welcome, humans," it said in accented English. "I am Guide Nextall. The council waits for you in the main chamber. Please follow me and do not touch anything you see." They walked through corridors filled with aliens of all shapes and sizes. Some looked almost human, but with different colored skin or extra arms. Others were so strange that Dong-ho could not even guess what planet they came from. A few looked like they were made of living metal or flowing liquid. All of them stopped what they were doing to stare at the humans as they passed. The main council chamber was huge. The ceiling was so high that it disappeared into shadow. 12 raised platforms were arranged in a circle with one smaller platform in the center. On each platform sat the representative of one alien race. Some sat on chairs that looked normal. Others rested on things that looked more like beds or pools of liquid. The largest platform held a creature that made Dong-ho's breath catch in his throat. It was at least 3 meters tall and covered in thick armor that looked like it was made of black metal. Its head was shaped like a skull with glowing red eyes. When it moved, Dong-ho could hear the sound of metal scraping against metal. "That is Chancellor Vextar of the Krillian Empire," whispered Guide Nextall. "He leads the council and his people control more star systems than any other race." The humans walked to the center platform and took their places. Dong-ho stepped forward and bowed deeply to the assembled aliens. This was the moment they had trained for. Everything Earth's future depended on what happened in the next few hours. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," Dong-ho began in his strongest voice. "I am Captain Lee Dong-ho, representing the planet Earth and all humanity. We come before you in peace and friendship. We seek only to join your great community of worlds and share in the knowledge and prosperity that comes from working together." One of the aliens made a sound like laughing, but it was not a pleasant sound. Another alien whispered something to its neighbor in a language that sounded like birds singing backwards. Chancellor Vextar leaned forward on his platform. When he spoke, his voice was deep and harsh, like metal being torn apart. "So the humans finally asked to join us," he said. "We have watched your little world for decades. We know what you are. You fight wars among yourselves over small pieces of land. You pollute your oceans and cut down your forests. You build weapons that could destroy your entire planet. And now you come here speaking of peace? Dong Ho felt sweat on his forehead, but his voice stayed steady. We have learned from our mistakes, honored Chancellor. The wars on Earth ended 20 years ago. We destroyed our nuclear weapons and turned our military factories into schools and hospitals. We cleaned our oceans and planted new forests. We chose the path of peace because we finally understood that fighting only brings suffering. Ji-won stepped forward and activated a device that filled the air above them with floating images. The images showed Earth as it was now. Clean cities with gardens on every rooftop. Hospitals where human doctors worked alongside medical robots to save lives. Schools where children learned about art and science and how to grow food without harming the soil. Ships leaving Earth not to conquer other worlds, but to explore and learn about the universe. This is what humanity has become, Ji-won said. We offer the galaxy our knowledge of medicine and farming. We offer our music and our stories. We offer our friendship to any who will have it. We ask for nothing but the chance to learn from the wisdom of the older races. The aliens looked at the images with what seemed like interest. A creature that looked like a giant flower with rainbow petals spoke in a voice like wind chimes. The humans show pretty pictures, but pictures can lie. What proof do we have that they truly seek peace? Park Min-ho spoke for the first time since entering the chamber. His voice was quiet and respectful. You can see our ship's honored ones. We brought only one small vessel with no weapons of any kind. Our entire space fleet consists of cargo ships and research vessels. We have no battle cruisers or war machines. We chose to build tools for learning instead of tools for killing. This caused more whispering among the aliens. Some seemed impressed by humanity's apparent weakness. Others seemed to find it amusing. Chancellor Vexitar raised one massive armored hand and the chamber fell silent. The council will now vote, he announced. All in favor of granting humanity membership as a full member of the Galactic Council? Not a single platform lit up with approval. All in favor of granting humanity protection as a developing species under council guidance? 11 platforms glowed with soft light. Only one remained dark. The vote is decided, Vexitar said. Humanity will be granted protection status. You will be assigned territories where you may live and work under our guidance. Council ships will defend your worlds from any threats. In return, you will provide resources and labor as requested by the Council. Dong Ho bowed again, even though his heart was sinking. Protection status was not what Earth had hoped for. It meant humanity would be treated like children who could not take care of themselves. But it was better than being rejected completely. We are grateful for the Council's generous protection, he said. As the humans prepared to leave the chamber, Dong Ho heard some of the aliens talking among themselves. They spoke in their own languages, but the translation devices let him understand some of what they said. The human territories will have good mining planets. Their world has much water. My people need water worlds for breeding. They seem strong, enough for heavy labor, better than the last species we protected. The aliens were already planning how to use humanity like a resource to be harvested. They thought humans were too weak and peaceful to resist whatever the Council decided to do with them. Dong Ho kept his face calm as they walked back to their ship, but inside he was thinking about the message he would send to Earth. The message would seem like a simple report about the Council meeting, but hidden in the ordinary words would be a code that only certain people on Earth would understand. The code would say just 2 words: winter coming. 3 months after the Council meeting, the first Krillian warships appeared at the edge of human space, like dark storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Admiral Zekthos commanded 500 vessels of various sizes from his flagship called Death's Edge. The ship was black as space itself and covered with weapons that could turn a small moon into dust. Dr. Kim Soo-jin was working late in her laboratory on research station Kepler-7 when the warning alarm started screaming. She looked up from her microscope where she had been studying samples of alien bacteria. Through the lab window she could see lights moving in the darkness. Lots of lights, too many lights. "This is station command to all personnel," came the voice over the intercom. "We have multiple unidentified ships approaching. This is not a drill. All non-essential personnel report to emergency shelters immediately. Sujin saved her work and began packing her research samples into storage containers. Her hands moved quickly, but she was not panicking. She had trained for this situation many times, even though everyone said it would never happen. The Galactic Council had promised to protect human settlements. Earth was supposed to be safe under their guidance. The first Krillian shuttles landed, 20 minutes later. Sujin watched from the shelter's observation window as armored soldiers poured out of the landing craft. They moved with military precision across the station's main plaza. Their armor was the same black metal as their ships, and their weapons glowed with red energy. "Why are they here?" whispered engineer Nam Woo-jin, who worked on the station's power systems. "We are under council protection. The Krillians cannot attack us without council approval." "Maybe they have approval," Sujin replied quietly. She was remembering things she had read in classified reports. Things about how the council really worked. Things about which species had real power and which species were just allowed to think they had power. The Krillian commander entered the shelter an hour later. He was tall even by Krillian standards, and his armor was decorated with symbols that probably meant he had won many battles. When he spoke, his voice came through a translator device that made him sound like he was talking through metal. "Humans of this station," he announced. "I am War Leader Dokmar of the Krillian 5th Fleet. By order of the Galactic Council, you are now under direct Krillian protection. You will continue your work, but you will also prepare for relocation to more suitable facilities." "Relocation?" asked Dr. Park Kyung-ho, who ran the station's medical bay. "But this is our home. We have been here for 15 years. We have important research projects that cannot be moved." Dokmar's glowing red eyes fixed on Park. "Your research will continue in Krillian facilities where it can be better supervised. Your previous work shows promise but lacks proper direction. We will provide that direction." Sujin felt cold fear settle in her stomach. The Krillians were not here to protect humans. They were here to take over everything humans had built and make humans work for them, instead of for themselves. On the mining platform called New Busan, that orbited a gas giant in the Kepler system, engineer Nam Woo-jin received similar news. Krillian warships surrounded the platform and troops boarded without asking permission. The platform's small security force offered no resistance because they had no weapons that could fight starships. The Krillian officer who took control of New Busan seemed almost bored by how easy it was. He walked around the mining facility like he was inspecting property he had just bought. He made notes on an electronic pad and spoke to his subordinates about production quotas and worker efficiency ratings. "This platform produces 17% below optimal levels," he told the human supervisors. "Under proper management, we can increase output by 40% within 6 months. The humans will work longer shifts and we will upgrade the equipment they use." "Longer shifts?" asked platform manager Lee Sang-min. "Our people already work 10-hour shifts. They need rest time and recreation time to stay healthy and productive." The Krillian made a sound that might have been laughter. "Humans require less rest than you think. We have studied your species. With proper motivation, you can work 14-hour shifts with minimal impact on productivity. Recreation time is inefficient. Work is its own reward." Similar scenes played out across human space. On research stations and mining platforms and small colonies, the same pattern repeated. Krillian ships arrived without warning. Krillian troops took control without resistance. Human civilians were told they were being relocated for their own good. On Earth, President Choi Hee-jin stood before cameras in the presidential palace and spoke to the world. Her face was calm, but her voice carried sadness that reached into every home on the planet. "My fellow humans," she began. "Today we face a great challenge. The Galactic Council has determined that humanity requires more direct guidance as we learn to take our place among the stars. Krillian forces are currently providing security for our outer settlements, while preparations are made for voluntary relocation programs." She paused and looked directly into the camera. "We must remember that we are guests in this galaxy. We have much to learn from the older races who have traveled between stars for thousands of years. We will cooperate fully with the Council's decisions and trust in their wisdom. The message was broadcast to every screen and radio on Earth. Most humans who heard it felt despair. Their leaders were surrendering without a fight. The dream of joining the galactic community as equals was over before it had really begun. But some humans who heard the message understood more than just the words. They heard the pauses between sentences. They noticed the way certain phrases were emphasized. They recognized code words hidden in what seemed like ordinary diplomatic language. In underground bunkers that did not appear on any official maps, General Kang Tae-ho reviewed reports from across human space. The reports came through secret channels that the aliens did not know existed. They told a different story than what was being broadcast on public networks. Kepler-7 reports successful concealment of primary research data. Read one message. Station personnel relocated to safety positions. Mining platform New Busan confirms equipment packages secured. All colonists accounted for and awaiting further instructions. Colonel O.G. Hai stood beside the general's desk studying holographic displays that showed the positions of every Krillian ship in human space. The displays updated in real time as information flowed in from sources the aliens had not discovered. They moved faster than our best estimates predicted, she said. But they are following exactly the pattern we hoped they would follow. Complete. Occupation with minimal resistance. They think we are helpless. How long before they realize their mistake? Asked the general. Their first supply convoys will begin moving tomorrow, Ji Hai replied. Captain Lim Dong-woo is positioned along their main supply route with the Myeongdong. If everything goes according to plan, the Krillians will start learning the truth about humans very soon. 3,000 kilometers below the surface of Earth in facilities that had been built in secret over 20 years, teams of technicians worked around the clock. They assembled equipment that had been designed to look like something else. They loaded cargo containers that were labeled as containing food and medical supplies but actually held very different materials. Dr. Yang Kyung-soo worked in a laboratory that was officially listed as a facility for studying plant genetics. The plants he studied were real, but they were not ordinary plants. They had been engineered to grow in specific environments and produce specific compounds when activated by certain signals. The aliens who had scanned Earth from orbit had seen greenhouse facilities. They had not realized they were looking at weapons factories. On the surface, normal life continued. People went to work and children went to school. News reports showed human officials meeting with Krillian representatives to discuss cooperation agreements. Everything looked peaceful and ordinary, but late at night in houses across the planet, people received quiet visitors. The visitors looked like ordinary citizens, but they carried messages that were not ordinary at all. They spoke in whispers about duties that had been postponed, but not forgotten, about promises that were about to be kept. Teacher Jian Min Ki taught history at a school in Seoul during the day. At night, he maintained communication equipment that connected resistance cells across 3 continents. His students knew him as a gentle man who loved books and encouraged them to think for themselves. They did not know that he had spent 5 years learning 17 alien languages and memorizing the technical specifications of every major starship design in the galaxy. Nurse Park, So Young, worked at a hospital where she treated injured workers and delivered babies and comforted the families of patients who could not be saved. She was known for her kindness and her skill with difficult cases. No one knew that she also gathered information about alien physiology from databases that the Krillians thought were secure. No one knew that she was building detailed files on the weaknesses of 12 different alien species. The Krillians established their main command center in Geneva, where the old United Nations building had once stood. Admiral Zekthos moved his headquarters there and began issuing orders for the systematic exploitation of human space. He was pleased with how smoothly the occupation was proceeding. These humans are even weaker than we expected. Captain Lim Dong-woo was loading supply containers onto his cargo ship Myeongdong when the coded message arrived on his personal communicator. The message looked like a routine shipping manifest, but hidden in the numbers was something that made his heart beat faster. 3 simple words that meant everything was about to change. Winter is coming. Dong-woo finished loading the last container and sealed the cargo bay. To anyone watching, he looked like an ordinary freight captain preparing for another boring supply run between the outer colonies. His ship looked old and slow with patches of rust on the hull and mismatched parts that suggested many years of rough use. The Krillians had been watching human cargo traffic for 3 months now. They saw exactly what they expected to see. Weak humans struggling to keep their primitive ships running while carrying supplies to settlements that were no longer their own. Dongwu had made this same route 12 times since the occupation began. The aliens barely bothered to scan his ship anymore, but today would be different. 6 hours after leaving Earth, orbit Dongwu's sensors detected the approaching Krillian supply convoy. 23 ships carrying equipment and troops to reinforce the occupation forces scattered across human space. The convoy was protected by 4 escort vessels armed with enough firepower to destroy a small city. Dongwu activated systems that the Krillians had never seen because they had been carefully hidden inside what looked like normal ship components. The old cargo containers in his hold opened to reveal weapons that had been designed specifically for fighting alien technology. The patches of rust on his hull slid away to expose sensor arrays that were more advanced than anything the Galactic Council possessed. The Myeongdong was not a cargo ship. It was a stealth bomber that had been disguised as civilian traffic for months, while gathering intelligence on Krillian fleet movements. Lieutenant Seo Mina piloted another ship that looked like a passenger transport. Her vessel, the Gangnam, carried what appeared to be civilian refugees being relocated to safer worlds. The refugees were real, but they were not ordinary civilians. They were soldiers who had trained for years to fight in zero-gravity environments wearing spacesuits that looked like civilian clothing. When the coded activation signal reached both ships, they dropped their disguises simultaneously. The Krillian convoy commander had just enough time to register that his sensors were detecting massive energy signatures from the 2 human vessels before both ships opened fire. The weapons they used were unlike anything in the alien databases. They fired projectiles that moved at nearly light speed and carried warheads that could adapt their detonation pattern based on the target's armor configuration. The first Krillian escort ship exploded before its commander could even sound an alarm. The second managed to raise its shields, but the human weapons simply passed through the energy barriers as if they did not exist. The third escort tried to turn and run but found that the human ships were much faster than they appeared. Within 10 minutes, the entire Krillian convoy was floating debris. Not a single alien had survived to report what happened. News of the convoy's disappearance reached Admiral Zekthos 6 hours later. He studied the reports with growing anger and confusion. His ships had simply vanished. There were no distress calls, no battle recordings, no wreckage that could be identified. 27 vessels and 3,000 Krillian soldiers had disappeared, completely. Send reconnaissance flights along the convoy route, he ordered. Find out what happened to them. But the reconnaissance flights found nothing. The human ships had already moved to new positions and changed their appearances again. By the time Krillian search teams reached the battle site, any evidence had been carefully removed or destroyed. On the research stations and mining platforms that were under Krillian occupation, strange things began to happen. Equipment that had worked perfectly for months suddenly started malfunctioning. Communication systems developed mysterious interference. Atmospheric processors began producing air that made Krillian soldiers feel sick and dizzy. Dr. Yang Kyung-soo had spent years preparing for this moment. The plants in his research facility were not just genetically modified crops. They were biological weapons that could be activated by specific radio signals. When the activation codes were transmitted, the plants began releasing compounds into the air circulation systems that were harmless to humans but toxic to Krillian physiology. The aliens became confused and disoriented. Their reaction times slowed, and their coordination suffered. They assumed it was some kind of space sickness caused by living in artificial environments for too long. Major Bae Jun-ho had been working as a mining supervisor on Luna Colony when the Krillians arrived. He had cooperated fully with the occupation forces and even helped them optimize production schedules. The aliens trusted him because he seemed eager to please and afraid of causing trouble. They had no idea that Bae was actually a special forces officer who had been placed in deep cover 5 years earlier. While he pretended to manage mining operations, he was actually mapping every Krillian position and identifying the weak points in their defensive arrangements. When the activation signal reached Luna Colony, Bay triggered hidden systems that had been built into the mining equipment years before. The massive excavation machines that had been digging valuable minerals from the lunar surface revealed themselves to be heavily armed combat vehicles. The processing facilities that refined ore into useful materials were actually weapons manufacturing plants that had been producing ammunition while the aliens watched. The Krillian garrison on Luna found themselves under attack from an enemy that seemed to appear out of nowhere. Human miners who had seemed weak and frightened suddenly moved with military precision. They wore armor that had been disguised as work suits and carried weapons that had been hidden inside mining tools. The battle for Luna Colony lasted only 4 hours. When it was over, every Krillian soldier was either dead or captured. The humans had not lost a single person. Similar attacks erupted across human space as the activation signal spread from system to system. On Research Station Kepler-7, Dr. Kim Soo-jin revealed that her bacterial samples were actually programmable nanomachines that could infiltrate Krillian computer systems. The equipment she had been using to study alien biology became weapons that could disable starship engines and life support systems. Engineer Nam Woo-jin on mining platform New Busan activated hidden weapon systems that had been built into the station's structure during construction. What the Krillians thought was a helpless mining facility became a fortress capable of defending itself against an entire fleet. The aliens found themselves trapped on platforms and stations that had seemed safe but were actually elaborate traps. Every human facility had been designed with hidden defenses. Every piece of civilian equipment had a military purpose that the aliens had never suspected. Nurse Park So-young used her access to medical systems to inject Krillian soldiers with compounds that looked like routine vaccinations, but actually contained tracking devices and chemical agents that would make the aliens easier to capture. Teacher John Min-ki activated communication networks that jammed Krillian signals while allowing human resistance cells to coordinate their attacks. The humans who had seemed like helpless civilians revealed themselves to be highly trained soldiers who had been hiding in plain sight for years. They knew everything about Krillian technology and tactics because they had been studying their enemies while pretending to be their servants. Admiral Zekthos watched his occupation forces crumble with growing horror. Reports flooded in from every human settlement. His soldiers were under attack from enemies who seemed to know exactly where they would be and exactly how to defeat them. The humans were not fighting like desperate civilians trying to protect their homes. They were fighting like professional military units executing a carefully planned campaign. "How is this possible?" he demanded of his intelligence officers. "Our scans showed no human military installations. Their ships were all unarmed cargo vessels. Their settlements had no defensive weapons." "The scans were correct, sir," replied Intelligence Coordinator Vex Mall. "There were no military installations, because the entire human infrastructure was military. Every civilian facility was designed to serve a dual purpose. Every transport ship was a disguised warship. Every human civilian was actually a trained soldier." The Admiral stared at the tactical displays showing the collapse of his forces across 3 star systems. Humans were not just fighting back against superior numbers and advanced technology, they were winning. "Send a message to High Command," he ordered. "Request immediate reinforcement, full battle fleet deployment. These humans are not what they appeared to be." But even as he sent the message, Zekthos knew it might already be too late. The humans had spent decades preparing for this war while pretending to be peaceful. They had studied their enemies while their enemies ignored them. They had built weapons while their enemies thought they were building schools. The galaxy was about to learn that the most dangerous opponents were not those who showed their strength openly, but those who hid their strength until the perfect moment to reveal it. General Huang Sok-jin broadcast a message from a location that, he report, Fleet Admiral Gexron commanded the most powerful military force in the known galaxy. His armada of 2,000 warships had conquered entire star systems and brought dozens of species under Krillian control. When he received Admiral Zekthos's desperate call for help, he almost laughed at the situation. "Humans?" he said to his bridge crew as his flagship Endless Victory prepared to jump to hyperspace. "Zekthos is being defeated by humans, the same species that begged the Council for protection just months ago. The Admiral had read the intelligence reports about Earth, a primitive world with no space navy worth mentioning, a species that had abandoned warfare and chosen to focus on art and science and other useless pursuits. They should have been grateful for Krillian guidance instead of causing trouble. Gexron planned to end the human rebellion quickly and brutally. He would destroy their homeworld and scatter the survivors to work camps across the Empire. The other protected species would see what happened to those who dared to resist Krillian authority. When the Great Fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the solar system, Gexron expected to find the wreckage of Zekthos' forces and, perhaps a few human ships trying to hide behind their planet's moon. Instead, his sensors detected something that made no sense at all. "Admiral," reported his sensor operator with confusion in her voice, "I am reading massive energy signatures throughout this system. There appear to be hundreds of ships hiding behind asteroids and space debris." "Impossible," Gexron replied. "Our intelligence shows that humans have no significant space fleet. Scan again." But the second scan confirmed what the first had shown. The solar system was full of human warships that had been concealed so perfectly that they were almost invisible until they began powering up their weapon systems. Admiral Song Young-ho stood on the bridge of his flagship, called Soul's Pride, and watched the alien fleet spread out in attack formation. His ship looked nothing like the cargo vessels the Krillians had been fighting for the past week. It was sleek and deadly with armor that could withstand direct hits from the most powerful weapons in the galaxy. "All ships report ready for combat," announced his communications officer. "Ghost Fleet acknowledges. Shadow Squadron confirms weapons lock. Stealth Wing is in position behind the enemy formation." Young-ho had waited 30 years for this moment. 30 years of careful planning and preparation, while the galaxy assumed humanity was weak and harmless. The Earth Defense Fleet had been built in secret, using technology that combined human innovation with alien science stolen during decades of diplomatic meetings. "Begin Phase 1, he ordered. The first sign that something was wrong came when Krillian ships at the rear of the formation simply disappeared. One moment they were there and the next moment they were gone without even sending distress signals. Admiral Gexron ordered his ships to close ranks and prepare for attack from an invisible enemy. Captain Ryu Jae-sung piloted his destroyer Incheon through a series of maneuvers that would have killed any other species. His ship spun and rolled and dove toward the Krillian fleet at accelerations that pressed him deep into his command chair. Human bodies had evolved on a world with higher gravity than most alien species could tolerate. What felt normal to Ryu would crush a Krillian pilot into unconsciousness. The aliens tried to target his ship, but their computers could not track something that moved so unpredictably. Ryu fired missiles that split apart into dozens of smaller warheads just before impact. Each warhead was smart enough to pick its own target and adapted its detonation pattern to cause maximum damage to specific ship types. 3 Krillian cruisers exploded simultaneously as the adaptive warheads found weak points in their armor that no alien weapon had ever been able to exploit. Commander Moon Ji-soo led a squadron of ships that looked like they were retreating in panic from the much larger alien force. The Krillians pursued her ships eagerly, thinking they had found an easy target. What they actually found was a carefully planned trap. Moon's ships led the aliens into an asteroid field where human forces had been waiting for months. The asteroids were not natural space rocks. They were camouflaged weapons platforms that activated as soon as the Krillian ships entered the kill zone. The alien commanders realized too late that they were surrounded by enemies that had been invisible until the moment of attack. Their ships were torn apart by weapons fire coming from every direction, while Moon's squadron turned around and joined the assault from behind. The Krillians had superior numbers and more powerful individual ships, but they could not fight an enemy they could not predict. Human tactics made no sense according to standard military doctrine. They used chaos and deception instead of organized battle formations. They sacrificed tactical advantages to gain psychological ones. They fought like they were willing to die for something more important than victory. Colonel Ko Hyun-jin had spent months studying Krillian battle recordings while pretending to be a cultural attaché during diplomatic meetings. He knew how alien commanders thought and how they would react to different situations. This knowledge let him stay one step ahead of enemies who had been fighting wars for centuries longer than humans had been traveling between stars. When the Krillians tried to regroup and form defensive positions, Ko predicted exactly where they would go and had weapons waiting for them. When they attempted flanking maneuvers, he knew which direction they would choose and had counterattacks prepared. When they called for reinforcements, he intercepted their communications and sent false orders that scattered their support ships. Dr. Shin Yunji had developed what she called medical nanobots during the diplomatic presentations to the Galactic Council. The nanobots were real, and they could heal injuries and cure diseases exactly as she had demonstrated. What she had not mentioned was that the same nanobots could be reprogrammed for very different purposes. When Krillian ships tried to ram human vessels rather than face defeat, the nanobots released into space by previous battles infected their computer systems. The tiny machines rewrote alien software and took control of ship functions. Krillian vessels found themselves firing on their own allies, or shutting down their life support systems, or opening airlocks that vented their crews into space. The battle raged for 18 hours, but the outcome was never really in doubt. The humans had been preparing for this fight for decades, while the aliens had assumed it would never happen. Every human ship knew exactly what it was supposed to do, and every human crew had trained for years to do it perfectly. Sergeant Lee Hoon-young fought in boarding actions when Krillian Marines tried to capture human ships instead of destroying them. He took wounds that would have killed most aliens but kept fighting with injuries that should have left him unconscious from pain and blood loss. Human evolution had given his species the ability to keep functioning under extreme stress that alien physiology could not match. When Krillian soldiers shot him with energy weapons designed to instantly incapacitate any living creature, Lee absorbed the damage and returned fire with weapons that had been specifically designed to penetrate alien armor. When they tried to overwhelm him with superior numbers, he used the confined spaces inside starships to neutralize their advantage and force them to fight him one at a time. The aliens discovered that humans did not just fight to win battles. They fought like their entire species would die if they failed. This desperation made them dangerous in ways that no other species had ever been dangerous before. Fleet Admiral Gexron watched his mighty armada being systematically destroyed by enemies he had expected to crush without effort. His flagship was surrounded by wreckage that had once been the pride of the Krillian Navy. Ships that had conquered star systems were being defeated by human vessels that should not have existed. "Sir," reported his tactical officer with fear obvious in his voice. "We have lost 60% of our fleet. The humans are moving to surround our remaining ships. Request instructions." Gexron stared at the tactical display showing the collapse of everything he had believed about military power in the galaxy. A species that the Galactic Council had dismissed as harmless was destroying the most advanced military force in known space. "Send a message to all Krillian forces," he ordered. "General retreat. All ships withdraw immediately. Do not engage human forces unless absolutely necessary for survival." But even as he gave the order, Gexron knew that many of his ships would never make it home. The humans were not content to simply defend their territory. They were pursuing the retreating aliens and destroying every Krillian vessel they could catch. Admiral Song Young-ho received reports from across the solar system as the battle ended. Human casualties were surprisingly light considering they had just fought the largest space battle in recorded history. Krillian losses were catastrophic. Most of their fleet was destroyed, and the survivors were fleeing toward the edge of the system. "Shall we pursue them, sir?" asked his tactical officer. Young-ho considered the question carefully. The humans had just proven they could defeat the Krillian military in open battle. Now they had to decide what to do with that victory. "Send a message to all human commanders," he said finally. "Phase 2 begins immediately. We are no longer defending our homes. We are liberating the galaxy." The message was received by human fleets that had been hidden in deep space for years. Weighty. The emergency session of the Galactic Council took place in chaos and fear. Representatives from 12 species sat in the same chamber where they had once dismissed humanity as too weak to deserve full membership. Now they watched holographic displays showing human fleets systematically dismantling Krillian strongholds across 23 star systems. President Choi Hee-jin entered the chamber. with a dignity that had been missing from humanity's first appearance before the Council. She was no longer asking for permission to join the galactic community. She was announcing humanity's intention to reshape it completely. Admiral Park Sung-min walked beside her wearing the uniform of the Earth Defense Force. The uniform was black, with silver stars and carried decorations that most of the aliens had never seen before. They were medals for battles fought in secret, campaigns waged in darkness, victories achieved through patience and planning that had taken decades to complete. Honored members of the Galactic Council, Ye Jin began in a voice that carried absolute confidence. We return to you with news from across the galaxy. The Krillian Empire that has oppressed so many worlds for so many centuries is no longer capable of continuing its reign of terror. The holographic displays above the chamber showed real-time footage from liberated worlds. Human soldiers working alongside alien civilians to remove Krillian occupation forces. Freed slaves embracing their rescuers with tears of joy. Prison camps being opened, and their inmates walking into sunlight for the first time in years. Chancellor. Vextar's armored form seemed smaller than it had months before when he had mocked human weakness. His glowing red eyes flickered as he processed reports from across his crumbling empire. This is impossible, he said in his harsh metallic voice. Humans are a protected species. They have no military capability. They have no experience with interstellar warfare. General Kim Min-suk stepped forward to address the council. She had been introduced as a cultural exchange coordinator during humanity's first diplomatic mission. Now she wore the uniform of a general who had just completed the liberation of 6 star systems in 14 days. The Zenthari homeworld sends its gratitude to the council, she announced with carefully controlled irony. After 3 generations of slavery under Krillian rule, the Zenthari people are free to govern themselves again. They wish to thank the Council for providing such effective protection during their centuries of suffering. The sarcasm was unmistakable. Several alien representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats as they realized how completely they had failed the species they claimed to protect. A new voice spoke from the chamber's communication system. It belonged to Prime Minister Telmari of the Zenthari Republic, a government that had been destroyed by Krillian conquest forces 60 years earlier and had just been restored by human liberation armies. The human soldiers who freed my people fought not for conquest but for justice, Telmari said. They asked for nothing in return except the promise that we would never again allow the strong to oppress the weak. They have shown us what true strength looks like. It protects those who cannot protect themselves. Intelligence Director Yu Tai-kyung presented evidence that made several council members gasp in shock. Detailed records of Krillian war crimes, documentation of slave labor camps, proof of systematic genocide against species that had resisted occupation, evidence that the Galactic Council had known about these atrocities and chosen to ignore them. Every diplomatic mission humanity sent to Council space included intelligence operatives, Yu explained calmly. Every cultural exchange was an opportunity to gather information about Council activities. Every peace conference was a chance to document the crimes being committed in the galaxy's name. The aliens realized that humanity's apparent naivety had been an elaborate deception that had lasted for decades. While they thought they were dealing with primitive civilians, they had actually been investigated by professional intelligence agents who had been building detailed case files on every species in the galaxy. Captain Han Dong-min activated another set of holographic displays showing the true scope of human civilization. The images revealed star systems that no council survey had ever detected. Worlds where millions of humans lived and worked in cities that made alien technology look primitive. Space stations that dwarfed anything the council had built. Earth was never humanity's only world, Han announced. It was our diplomatic capital, the place where we met with alien representatives while our real civilization remained hidden from those who might wish us harm. The council members stared at images of human worlds that had existed for generations without their knowledge. Advanced technology that seemed centuries ahead of anything they possessed. Industrial capability that could produce warships faster than any known species could destroy them. Fleet Admiral Chong Woo-seok entered the chamber leading representatives from 23 alien species that the council had never encountered before. These were races that had been contacted by human explorers and chosen to ally themselves with humanity, rather than reveal themselves to a council dominated by the Krillian Empire. "The galaxy is much larger than your council believed," Chung said. "Many species chose to remain hidden rather than submit to Krillian rule. They waited for someone strong enough to challenge the existing order, someone who fought for justice instead of conquest." Ambassador Yang Hye-young presented the council with humanity's final offer, a document that outlined the terms for a new, galactic government based on equality and mutual respect instead of domination by the strongest military power. "You have a choice," she said. "Join a reformed galaxy where all species have equal rights and representation, or continue supporting a system that allows the strong to prey upon the weak until someone stronger comes along to prey upon you." The holographic displays showed human fleets positioned near the homeworlds of every species represented on the council, not as a threat but as a demonstration of capability. Humanity could conquer the galaxy if they chose to do so. Instead, they were offering partnership to those willing to embrace change. Chancellor Vextar made one final attempt to salvage Krillian dominance. "The Council will never accept human demands. We have ruled this galaxy for 1,000 years. No primitive species will dictate terms to their superiors." President Hyojin smiled sadly at the alien leader's words. "You still do not understand what has happened here. This is not a negotiation between equals. This is humanity explaining what the galaxy will look like going forward. You can choose to be part of building something better, or you can choose to remain an obstacle that must be removed." The vote was held in silence heavy with the weight of changing history. One by one, the alien representatives chose their future. Some voted to join humanity's new galactic alliance. Others abstained, waiting to see which way the balance of power would shift. Only the Krillians and their closest allies voted to reject the human proposals. "The vote is recorded," Hyojin announced. "For those species that choose cooperation and equality, we offer friendship and partnership in building a better galaxy. For those who choose to cling to the old ways of domination and oppression, we offer one final opportunity to reconsider." Captain Minjai received the signal from the council chamber and transmitted new orders to human fleets across the galaxy. The orders were simple and final. Krillian military forces had 24 hours to surrender unconditionally or face complete destruction. The response came faster than anyone expected. Krillian commanders on dozens of worlds laid down their weapons and ordered their troops to comply with human demands. The empire that had seemed invincible just weeks before collapsed like a house built on sand when the foundation was removed. In his private chambers aboard the surrendering flagship Endless Victory Fleet, Admiral Gexaron composed his final report to the Krillian High Command. The message was simple, but it contained a truth that would reshape how every species in the galaxy understood the nature of power. "We were defeated not by superior technology or greater numbers," he wrote. "We were defeated by an enemy that understood something we had forgotten. True strength comes not from the ability to destroy, but from the wisdom to know when destruction is necessary and when mercy is possible. The humans showed us mercy when they could have chosen annihilation. That is why they will succeed where we failed." President Hyojin stood once more before the reformed Galactic Council 6 months later. The chamber had been rebuilt to accommodate representatives from 47 species, including many that had been freed from Krillian oppression. The new council operated on principles of consensus and cooperation instead of domination by the strongest military power. "Today we celebrate not the victory of one species over another," she said to the assembled delegates. "We celebrate the victory of justice over tyranny, the victory of cooperation over conquest, the victory of those who choose to build rather than destroy." The galaxy had learned a lesson that would be remembered for generations. The most dangerous enemies were not those who loved war, but those who understood peace well enough to know when it could no longer be preserved through words alone. Humanity had spent decades learning to be better than their enemies. But